So good afternoon, councillors. I'll take you through a very quick presentation just highlighting some of the aspects that were in the quarterly report. So I'll run through some of the achievements that we noted in the report, a couple of challenges. I'll identify 3 performance measures that I think we need to have a bit of a focus on, and then finally do a very brief overview of the financial performance. So if I just flick through to the achievements slide. Oh, hold up. Great. So we just pulled through some achievements that kind of were, I guess, the key ones that we saw coming through in the report. One of the big things is the public consultation for the Auckland Plan and the 10-year budget, where we had 32,000 people making submissions. One of the key things there as well is the robotisation of some of the analysis of those submissions, so that's a good example of us using technology to make that process far more efficient. We had the vector lights starting on the Auckland Harbour Bridge, celebrating kind of sustainable technologies, so that's been a good accomplishment, partnership with Council and Vector on that. The Auckland Airport, they went out with their notice of requirement around the second runway. They're seeking an extra 72 metres on the length of that consented runways, so that will allow for kind of the safer landing of longer range aircraft, so that's just an important aspect of that. And also I have Barracliff down as an achievement there as well, just in terms of the head of agreement that we signed with Te Akatai for the purchase and development of Barracliff. Of course, that would have been covered by Panuku in their presentation. Moving on into more of the environmental area. Right. Later on in the workshop, we'll be talking about green bonds. We are about to issue green bonds. We're the first council in New Zealand to issue green bonds, and we're one of a select group of C40 cities around the world. So that's quite an accomplishment for Auckland Council. I've got the food scrap service that's been launched in Papakura. This is a key element of reducing the waste going into landfills. One of the measures we'll focus on later is just the waste going into landfills, which currently is 145 kilograms per resident as opposed to a target of 110. That's just a reflection that that food scrap service, the implementation was delayed, so we're now seeing the results come through a little bit later. But it's great to see that rolled out in Papakura, and it will be rolled out across the city by 2020. And again, in the green space, we've had Green Flag Awards given to a number of our regional parks around the Auckland region, so that's a great accomplishment too. And also just progress on repairs to seawalls across the city in response to the coastal storms in January. You know, the city was buffeted by quite severe storms, so there's been good progress repairing, especially coastal areas, with the effects of that storm. We pulled out a couple of challenges that kind of came through in the report too. This is running out of battery. Okay, a couple of challenges came through. One was around the swimming pools during summer, where a number of them reach capacity quite often, and that raised some health and safety concerns, both with having crowded pools, having to monitor the safety of swimmers, but also with tensions of customers when you have full pools. So Park Sports and Recreation are looking at how we can manage that in future years. We think that the increase in popularity of pools, one, it was partly because of high temperatures, but secondly, it's probably a reaction to lower user fees and some pools having free usage. So we saw the corresponding increase in demand. And the other challenge that came through some of the commentary is around velvet leaf, which is affecting parts of Auckland, especially Helensville, Papakura and Franklin. So this is quite a nasty broadleaf plant that it's been named as one of the world's worst agricultural weeds. So we're working with Ministry of Primary Industries to try and manage that. But those are a couple of challenges to look out for. If I look at the performance measures, I want to highlight 3 areas. Okay, so the first area is around building resource consents, both the processing times and the customer satisfaction. So processing times currently for building consents, we're processing 88% of them within 20 working days and 71% of resource consents within 20 days. The target's 100%, and now that's a statutory target, and actually when you look at the results compared to last year, we're not doing too badly. But I would like to alert the Finance and Performance Committee to an issue that's been raised with the Audit and Risk Committee around the building consents numbers. Currently, we found that there are issues with the statutory clock and the way that we calculated the start time of that clock, as well as problems documenting decisions around when we go out to customers for more information, the decisions around starting and stopping that clock, which means that when we report that result at year end, we will probably have to discount the performance against that measure where we can't prove the evidence behind those decisions. So that's going to have quite a significant impact on the annual on the year-end result. We know that from February onwards we've tightened our processes around that, and we've got new systems in place, so we're quite confident that from February onwards we'll get a very accurate reading of performance. But of course in our annual report we're going to have to acknowledge that previous to February we can't necessarily rely on the information that's in our system, so that's going to have quite a negative effect. But the best we can do is be upfront about that and open in our disclosures, so just important to note that. Around the customer satisfaction as well, so customer satisfaction for building control delivery is 50% against the target of 65%, and in resource consents it's 48% against 55%. So there's a couple of reasons perhaps behind that. First is just the introduction of new technologies, new processes. There has been a lot of change in the area, so that could have a short-term effect on satisfaction. We would hope that that changes over the long term with things like consenting made easy coming in. But I also think it could reflect the number of staff vacancies in the regulatory area. So I had my team just give me the vacancy numbers at the moment, and in building consents, for example, we're 40 staff below where we should be, and in resource consents we're 25 staff. So, you know, we've had difficulty recruiting skilled staff in those areas, and perhaps that's why we're seeing this kind of poor result in customer satisfaction. The next area I'd like to focus on is noise control, and I've covered this area in previous reports. So we've had underperformance in 2 of the 4 noise control areas that we have contracts for. As I mentioned in my last report to this committee, we are going out and renewing those contracts in June. So for the 2 areas where we've had performance that's been at the appropriate level, we've renewed those contracts. That was with Armaguard. But for the other 2 areas, we're now reviewing those contracts, and there'll be an amalgamation of some of the areas, but they'll be actively managed through those contract renewals. So hopefully we'll see an improvement in the noise control performance moving forward. And I mentioned domestic curbside rubbish sent to landfills. Currently, I think we're at 145 kilograms per household. The target's 110. That just reflects that the food scrap service has been delayed in terms of its rollout. That was a decision I believe was made by councillors. So we're seeing the impact on the performance target there. As I said, it's rolled out in Papakura now. We'll roll out across the city. We'll full roll out across the city by 2020, and you'll see in the new performance framework that we are going to workshop soon, those targets reflect that rollout. And very briefly, I'll cover financial performance. Okay, and I might have to look to Kevin if I get much detailed questions around this. So pretty much you'll see there that we have a operating surplus of 39 million. Operating revenue's down. There's an unfavourable variance of 16 million there. A lot of that is due to building consents volumes being down, which means that we've had building revenue down. So that's down $9.2 million. It's offset by $58 million worth of operating expenditure savings, predominantly in repairs and maintenance, professional services and vacancies across the organisation. A major component of that too, 21 million, is interest cost savings. So we currently have interest rates that are below kind of where we had budgeted, so that's where a lot of savings are coming through. I guess it's above our benchmark level though, so it might be, these are good savings for now, but who knows in the future whether that will be sustained. In terms of the net surplus and deficit, you'll see that we have quite a horrible deficit there of $430 million. That's really just a reflection of a non-cash item. There's a book value adjustment for CRL, so that's the reason for that. In terms of CapEx, we had a year-end budget of $605 million. We're looking at a year-end forecast spend of $496 million, so that's kind of comparable to what we had last year. Currently, we're sitting at $320 million capital expenditure for year-to-date March, so that's the forecast for capital expenditure moving forward. Great.
Thank you, David.
Sorry, do we not call it capital on here? You call it non-operating. Where's the capital?
Oh, sorry, it's a bullet point right at the bottom of that slide.
Oh, right, rather than on the thing. Yep,
that's right.
Mego.
Yeah, thank you, David, for that presentation. Couple of questions. How long have we known that stopping the clock on building consents has not been in accordance with the rules set out under MB?
I believe that came to light late last year when MB, so it came to a bit of a change in the guidelines. So traditionally what councils have done is they've had 2 days to basically get the consent in and then start processing it. But the change in guidelines has meant that they now need to count it back to when they first received it. And so there's been a problem counting it back to when they first received. The thing is, if we receive an application and it's not full, then we don't need to start the clock, but if it is full, we have to count it back to that period, so late last year.
Isn't it fair to say, however, that people have been complaining about this for as long as I can remember? This shouldn't really, I mean, was it a case of the rules being changed, or was it a case that we didn't understand what the rules actually required? Because I understand it's the latter, not the former.
If I can make a comment for the chair, yeah, what it came down to, and this was across the across the country, so it wasn't Auckland Council in isolation.
Yep.
And what it came down to was really the interpretation of what was a start date versus a lodgement date. So there was an understanding that the day the processing team picked it up and became a start date was when you started the clock. But what's been clarified through this guideline, which, like I say, is now across the country, is that it's actually the lodgement date, the day that it was actually received by us as an entity.
So we weren't the only council making that mistake?
Definitely not, no.
However, it seems that the inaccuracy of our reporting might be as high as 40%. How do we report this year and not get a qualified opinion from the Audit Office? Maybe I direct that to you, Kevin.
Okay, yes, yep, yeah, thank you. It's through the chair. So look, what our auditors are concerned about is that what we present to our public is a fair representation of the situation. So what we've had to accept, and we're working through with the building and the resource consent teams through Penny Perrott herself as well, is what can we say with confidence we are sure of. So potentially what we may end up doing is actually saying, if we cannot confirm on a documented basis, so we're not saying we didn't have a valid reason to stop and start the clock, but have we got some evidence in our system to show the basis of that? If we can't prove that, maybe we have to just make the assumption that it wasn't appropriate to start the clock. So we're actually going to build more time frame into each process, which potentially means our our rate of successfully processing consents within 20 working days drops right down from the 77 down to potentially 50% or something. We're working our way through that right now, so what we can actually present to the public we have confidence about, which doesn't necessarily reflect the fact that we didn't actually have valid reasons for stopping the clock. We just can't show them the evidence.
Okay. And that would be an acceptable option from the Audit Office point of view?
We're drafting up wording that if we have to go down that path, and we'll run that past the auditors. Early indications are, as long as we're showing a fair representation, they'll be okay.
Thank you. Through you, Mr Chair, a second question. It's kind of ironic, building consents are down 9%, yet our problem is that we're under real pressure and we haven't got enough staff. But that 9% figure, how is that calculated? That's calculated year on year, is it?
So that's compared to the same year-to-date period in the previous year.
So that would be a worry for other reasons if building consents are actually dropping off at the very time when we think they should be increasing. What do we put that down to?
Yeah, well, one of the reasons actually, if you look at the net dwellings in the economics report, that's not dropping off. So we think that that's consents covering more multi-dwelling complexes. So actually,
so it might be repair work or additions rather than new home starts.
Or it could be that one consent covers a number of multi-dwelling. So you might have an apartment block, for example, with one consent that covers multiple dwellings.
Okay, so it might not be real.
I don't think the drop in dwellings is the same as the drop in consents.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that would be reassuring. Thank you. Thank you, Mr Chair.
However, the other answer to your question is the banks.
Yep.
Simply
There's
just
a credit
tightening the
squeeze.
screws on funding. I mean, that's...
The loan-to-value ratio
Yep.
changes. Yeah.
Councillor Casey.
Two questions. One's about what's happening at noise control in terms of their performance
Yep.
and what we're doing about it.
So there is underperformance by some of the contractors in noise control. So there are 4 areas. 2 areas were performing at standards, so those contracts have been reviewed for June. The other areas, sorry, just let me get my notes because I actually got the areas where we were underperforming. Yeah, so so 2 of the areas are underperforming, and we will be looking at whether we renew those contracts or not. We're actually merging, I think it's the north and the west together, which covers one. I think north is underperforming. So we are managing it through that, and we'll be looking at whether those contracts are renewed in June or not. But of course, the performance in the contract will be one of the deciding factors in whether that contract's renewed or not.
How do you manage it?
I'll have to get more detail on that, sorry. Councillor Casey.
How can I find out? How do we deal with it, underperforming? You give them less money? Do you tell them?
Oh, yes, we do sanction their fee if they underperform. So I think we have been applying sanctions to their fees.
And perhaps no contract renewal.
Yeah, through the chair, as the chair's just said, I mean, ultimately you can have sanctions. It depends on the terms and conditions of each contract, how much the sanctions can be. But ultimately, if it continues on as non-performance, because there are KPIs incorporated in those contracts, when it comes time to renew contracts, that'll be part of their track record.
My other question relates to the vast amount of work we do with Lagoimas. And I wondered if you could tell me how many of the Lagoimas end up with the Ombudsman?
I don't have the information on hand unless it's in the detailed report.
And come back to Councillor Casey on that. Yep.
Thank you, I'd like that.
Right, we're 10 minutes over, folks, and we're going to have a little break, so which will put us half an hour over. So I've got Councillor Cooper and Councillor Hills.
I think, yeah, my concerns are around the building consents, because if the guidelines have been clarified or changed, often that material isn't actually ready for processing, and that's almost immediately you have to stop the clock. But people do complain about stopping the clock, but you can't process something if you don't have all the information. So I think it puts us in an invidious position. So that's my concern, that you know, elected members get a lot of flack about this, but it's important that we understand the proper process. What I'd like to know too is in terms of consenting made easy, that's been another issue, and I'm asking this for Councillor Quacks, because he asked me last Friday before last, is if we've got an issue with SAP as the platform for making this, our consenting made easy work, when are we going to have that repaired or fixed or properly aligned so it actually does work as we envisaged and makes the whole process quicker? You might not be the right person to ask, but that's been part of the problem, not the department, but the equipment they're given to work with.
Yeah, look, through the chair, I don't want to overly simplify it, but fundamentally you've got systems, you've got people doing the processing, and you've got the process you follow in between. And it's look, we know full well, we implement a new system, but many of the processes retain some legacy aspects to them. So there would be potentially 6 different ways of processing consent, even in the new system. So that is being worked on as we speak. They're actually trying to streamline the process. Consenting made easy should assist in many ways, because what that does is actually lead it to the customer drives the process. They will actually be lodging the information in a consistent format. So they are dealing with the process change right now. And I can't give a time frame. We'll have to get some more information for you.
So we will see an improvement over time. It's just that it's taking a long time.
Yes.
I know, but I suppose if you hurry it and botch it up, then you have another mess to fix up, and then everybody will be saying, "Why did you not do it properly?" So I guess we're in a cleft stick there. We have to do it properly after all those legacy systems. It's still a bit of a glitch. But yeah. Okay. No, that's good to know. Thank you.
Councillor Hills, to wrap it up.
Thanks.
How
And
do we get that answered?
they're quite specific questions. One is the projects at the back, and it's just maybe a comment going forward. The projects over 5 million and the issues with them. They do have commentary saying the local boards are happy. Local boards have been told, but some of as far as I know, those projects don't come to us as well. If there's just some way that we can get flagged, because often people will contact us and we've got no idea on the delay or the issue or the problem or the success.
Yep.
And it's good that local boards are getting a thorough briefing on it, but it will be good just to maybe a memo comes to councillors too, so we're all on the same page.
Same information to both.
Especially on those bigger projects, because we all are elected locally and yeah. The other one, I see we're looking at 15 million underspend on staff, which many people I'm sure would celebrate, but I grant each department has done a great work in making sure that we're only employing who we need to, but I worry if it's just arbitrary or an under pressure type of thing, and then we are under delivering in areas, or there's our long, medium to long term issue if we, it's sort of like a false economy, like suddenly we'll burst out next year 20 million over because we've understaffed things or put stress on, or we have no one to cover everyone's holidays or whatever it is. So that's one issue on the staffing, and also I'm worried it might have a knock-on effect to places like the customer service lines, which shows a continuing drop of service levels. Obviously the demand is going up too, but are we staffing those things correctly? Because someone can only answer 100 phone calls or whatever it is. You need another person to answer the next 100.
So I think it's a combination, to be honest, of vacancies in some frontline roles which are very hard to fill. So regulatory is an example that I used, but also it does reflect that we have really tightened the recruitment process, especially within corporate office. So for every role that now is vacant, there's a thorough review panel that has a look at that role. And also for any high-value roles, especially those roles above $100,000, there's a review by the executive leadership team as well. So I guess it's that staff saving shows, it's affected by both of those things.
Okay. I just want to feel confidence coming into the next year that we don't just celebrate that reduction if in other areas we're getting pressure.
Yep.
There's knock-on effects. So I just want to make sure it's being measured on both sides.
Very good point.
Thanks.
Right. And sorry, just one last comment through the chair, if I can. bearing in mind that when the executive team or the review team are looking at these roles, they're also looking at the nature of the role. So as David mentioned in passing there, the corporate piece. So for instance, the finance, the ICT areas, the back office type functions is where the pressure's been put on. Community services, community facilities have had increases in staff numbers this year.
Yep.
Regulatory is going through a large recruitment process right now. So the delivery arms is where the concession's made. That's where the need is. So that's part of the focus they do.
But is there work going on the contact centre space, because there is that continued theme? No?
Yeah, you look through the chair. The easy answer, I suppose, is that the very next review, 17A, is the customer services area, how effectively are delivering the service, which will look at the funding and the governance structure to that.
Thank you.
Councillor Bartley, to wrap it up.
Thank you, Mr Chair, and through you, thank you for your presentation. I just wanted to ask about the 57 million CapEx that we're behind, CapEx spend that we're behind, and it gives a reason of mainly due to timing of land acquisitions. What were the other reasons that weren't the main reason? And also, have we got the capacity to spend that much money by the end of the year?
Yeah, so we are forecasting that we won't spend the entire budget. So I think it's 496 million is what we're forecasting to spend. So the reasons for the CapEx underspend is a number of reasons. So land acquisitions is one, where an acquisition of land has been delayed, but also just work programs being behind schedule is another. So there are a variety of reasons. That's one of the problems with the capital kind of program. It's a large program, so there'll be a variety of reasons why we haven't progressed as quickly as we thought we would.
And have we got capacity? Because I think we have capacity issues in that department.
Well, yeah, I guess, again, it depends on the department. So I think Healthy Waters, for example, is ahead of their capital projects. So it really depends on the type of department you're looking at, whether they're behind or ahead. And capacity can be an issue.
Councillor Cooper.
Yeah, sorry again, it was something I meant to bring up. It was around the two challenges, and out of all the challenges that you could put in the whole of our council groups, you've put high public swimming pool use. And I see this as a huge health and safety wellbeing issue, as you've stated here. And several years ago, we had a report back on free swimming for kids, and it showed clearly it wasn't working, and the goal was to have kids learning to swim. And what we've really ended up with is queues, not enough public access, and people just splashing around in dirty water, basically. And I actually think, and we can say we're building the odd pool here, but that is years and years down the track. And my opinion, I do not think we are meeting our health and safety and wellbeing obligations by allowing it. And I do think that, in some ways, one of the reasons I have not supported free swimming pools for kids is because it's created this. And effectively, putting back a small charge is like a congestion charge, just like we would do on our roads. But we're not doing anything. We're just trying to manage a dreadful situation. And everybody will scream, and it's a terrible political decision not to do it. But the reality is, look what it's creating. And if someone dies or gets a severe illness, we are under the gun, and we're not willing to be strong enough to change it. And I'm putting that challenge out there. I actually think it's really critical of all the challenges. This is our whole group, the whole parent thing, and that's number one there. And there's no plan here that I can see other than build a pool. The next one will be in Flatbush sometime in a few years. That's not going to... So anyway, that's my comment, but I think that's our challenge, Mr Mayor. And it might be unpalatable, but I actually think there's good reason for it. I'm quite worried about someone drowning or getting a nasty illness.
Kevin will make a quick comment.
I almost feel obligated just here on behalf of the organisation. Just the reason we've noticed this is because there are queues outside, and the reason there are queues outside is because Rob McGee and his team take this very seriously. The ratios of attendance to people in the pool.
It's been going on for 5 years though.
Yeah,
It's been going
but-
on for 5 years,
Yeah,
and
but-
I get that. I'm
The
sorry.
only reason I want to
but
raise this
it's
because not to give, I don't want to go away with the impression that the pools aren't safe. The reason they are actually maintaining the safety standards within the pool is what's creating the issue we have now. But you are
Yes,
right, it has been
which
going
the
for a while.
public aren't happy with, and the people that buy season passes are not doing it anymore.
Yes.
So we're losing revenue as well. So, you know, I think that's a kind of crisis management action, but it's not the answer. Thank you.
I do have a part answer, and I've not been facetious, but the water quality targeted rate we've just brought in, hopefully within 5 years we're starting to see a real impact on parts of our inner city harbours, and in 10 years hopefully all of them, and that will start to impact on North Shore beaches as well. So the bottom line is we are doing something to improve water quality, which is actually seawater rather than fresh water, and
But you don't teach
but
kids
you
to
will get
swim
more
in
people
swimming
going to
pools.
beaches, one would have thought, instead of being frightened off by the reading for the day. Right, thank you very much. We have that resolution there, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Simpson. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? No. Thank you, David. Thank you, Kevin. And we've wrapped up for the day. We're going to have, not for the day, for 10 minutes. And then there's a workshop. Right. And Councillor Simpson.